Hello students, welcome back. In the last session we have discussed adding class to package and hiding classes. In today's session we will start with a new chapter, that is exceptions. So exceptions are some unexpected conditions which occurs at the time of program execution. And these conditions may lead to termination of the program. So handling exception, it is very important in the program. Exceptions, for example, you can consider if you are riding a bike and if you fall, that may lead to serious injury or even that may cause the death. Even in the program, when program executes, some unexpected things happens and that may lead to termination of the program, leading again with a serious problems. So such conditions needs to be handled properly in the program. For example, while riding a bike, you should wear helmet to protect yourself. Again, that may save you from serious injury. So you are protecting yourself by wearing helmet, because you know while riding a bike there may be a chance of falling from the bike. Same way, while writing a program also, if you feel certain statements in the program may lead to some exceptions or some errors, those statements needs to be included in some block of code called as exception handling block, and that we will study in today's session. So let's start. Managing errors and exceptions. So an error may produce an incorrect output or may terminate the execution of the program abruptly, or even may cause the system to crash. It is therefore important to detect and manage errors properly, all possible error conditions in the program, so that program will not terminate or crash during execution. So when error occurs, as I have said, that may lead to termination of a program, or the program may crash during the execution of a program, and these things needs to be handled properly in the program. There are two different types of errors. So errors may be broadly classified into two categories. One is compile time errors and another is runtime error. As the name suggests, compile time errors are detected at the time of compilation of a program, and as the compile time errors are detected at the time of compilation, there is no effect of compile time errors on the execution of a program. Whereas runtime errors, these errors occurs at the execution time of the program. So all syntax errors will be detected and displayed by Java compiler, and therefore these errors are known as compile time errors. As you know about compile time errors, these are the errors which are displayed by the compiler. So Java compiler compiles the program and displays list of compile time errors. Whenever the compiler displays an error, it will not create the dot class file. As we know, if there are any errors in the program, Java compiler will not create a dot class file. It is therefore necessary that we fix all the errors before we can successfully compile and run the program. So it is important to successfully compile and run the program. To run the program, first we need to compile it successfully, then only we can run the program. Okay, the most common compile time errors, as you have executed some program based on C, you might be knowing about these errors. Some common compile time errors are like missing semicolon. If you are not giving semicolons at the end of a line or statement, that may generate a compile time error, or missing brackets in classes and methods, flower brackets missing, or misspelling of identifiers and keywords if you are using wrong names for identifiers and keywords, or missing double quotes in string. You are opening double quote but you are not closing double quotes in print statement. Even that may lead to a compile time error. Or use of undeclared variable. Variable is not declared, then too you are trying to use it in the program. It may lead to the compile time error. There are many different types of compile time errors. Different types of errors which are generated at the time of compilation of a program. In case of runtime errors, sometimes a program may compile successfully, creating the .class file, but may not run properly. So, program may be compiled successfully, but the program may not run properly. Such programs may produce wrong results due to the wrong logic, or may terminate due to errors such as stack overflow or divide by 0 or some other errors. So, the program which is compiled successfully does not mean it will run successfully as well. So, there may be some errors at the time of execution of the program as well, and such errors are called as runtime errors. Some of the most common runtime errors are listed here. The common runtime errors are divide an integer by 0, like if you are dividing a value like say 10 by 0 in the program, this may lead to a runtime error. At compile time, this will compile successfully without any errors, but while executing, this may generate an error, that is divide by 0 error. Accessing an element that is out of the bounds of an array. So, this is not army, this is array. You are trying to access an element from an array and you are giving an index value which is out of bound, means that index does not exist. So, that may again lead to runtime errors. Trying to store value into an array of incompatible class or type, means if you have an array of type integer and if you are trying to store a string into it, that may lead to a runtime error as well. Then trying to cast an instance of a class to one of its subclass, or trying to illegally change the state of a thread, or there are many other runtime errors. Okay. Now, exceptions, as I have defined, exception is a condition that is caused by runtime error in the program. So, exception, it is a condition which is caused by runtime errors. When the Java interpreter, again the program is executed by the interpreter in Java. So, Java interpreter encounters an error such as dividing an integer by 0, it creates an exception object. Now, this is important. Whenever there is an error at the time of execution of a program, what the interpreter does, it creates an exception object and it throws it. It creates an exception object which includes details about the problem. Suppose the error has occurred because of division of an integer by 0, it includes that information in the exception and it throws it. Throws, it simply means informs us that an error has occurred. Now, when the interpreter throws an exception, we should try to catch the exception object thrown by the error condition and then display an appropriate message for taking corrective actions. Now, whenever an interpreter throws an exception, we should write some code in the program to catch the exception and we need to take proper steps to display the proper message to the user, so that user can take corrective actions, and this task is known as exception handling. When the exception is thrown, and if you try to catch and if you take corrective measures, then it is called as handling exceptions. The purpose of exception handling mechanism is to provide a means to detect and report exceptional circumstances so that appropriate actions can be taken. So the purpose of handling exception, it is to provide means to detect and report an exception so that some appropriate action can be taken if such exceptions are occurred. Like I have said, if you are riding a bike and if you fall, you know that there is a chance of falling when you ride a bike. So take care of it, wear a helmet in advance so that you are protecting yourself. In the similar way, if there are certain statements in the program we feel may create or generate an exception at runtime, such statements needs to be included in exception handling block. The mechanism of exception handling suggests incorporation of separate error handling code that performs the following task. We have to include separate error handling code in the program. Apart from the program logic which we include, we have to include error handling code in the program as well. And that performs the following task. Error handling code performs the following task. First, find the problem, that is called as hit the exception. Second, inform that an error has occurred, that is throwing an exception. Third, receive the error information, that is called as catch the exception. And last, take corrective action called as handle the exception. The error handling code basically consists of two segments. Now handling code basically consists of two segments. One, to detect error and to throw exceptions. The first part includes detection and throwing an exception, and the other part includes catch exception and take appropriate action. The other part includes catching the exception and taking appropriate actions. Hierarchy of Java exception classes. So we have some hierarchy of exception classes. At the top of the exception class hierarchy, we have a class called as throwable class. So this is the top level class in the exception handling, that is throwable class. This is at the root of exception handling hierarchy. And this throwable class includes two subclasses. One is one is exception, and another it is error, which in turn includes some other subclasses. Like in case of exception, it consists of IO exception, SQL exception, class not found exception, and it also has one more important exception, that is runtime exception, which in turn includes some other exceptions like arithmetic, null pointer, number format, and so on. Whereas in case of error also we have some classes like stack overflow, virtual machine, out of memory error. So these are some subclasses of error class. So at the root of all the exceptions, we have the exception class, that is throwable. We have a class called as throwable class, and this class is located in the package. Now you can see it is located in the package java.lang.throwable. So throwable class, it is in package lang package, which is the default package imported by all the Java program. So that is located in lang package. Okay. Types of exceptions, or types of Java exceptions. Now there are mainly two types of exceptions. One is checked, another is unchecked. But according to Oracle, there are three types of exceptions. and these three types of exceptions are checked exception, unchecked exception, and one more, that is error. So in the diagram also you can see all the exceptions have been categorized as checked, unchecked, and error. Now what is checked, unchecked, and error? Now checked exception, the classes which directly inherit throwable class except runtime exception and error are known as checked exception. The classes which directly inherit throwable, now you can see the classes which directly inherit throwable in this diagram. The classes directly inherit throwable are exception and error. These are the two classes. Directly inherit throwable class except runtime exception and error. So leaving two, that is runtime exception and error. So leaving two, that is runtime exception and error. All the others are categorized as checked exception, means IO exception, SQL exception, class not found exception. These are called as checked exceptions. These are called as checked exception. Okay, example, IO exception again, SQL exception, etc. are called as checked exception. Checked exceptions are checked at the time, at compile time. Why it is called a checked exception? Because these are checked at the time of compilation, remember. That is why it is called a checked exception. In case of unchecked exception, the classes which inherit runtime exceptions are known as unchecked exceptions. Example, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, array out of bound exception, etc. Unchecked exceptions are not checked at compile time, but they are checked at runtime. Why it is called as unchecked? Because it is not checked at the time of compilation, but it is checked at the time of execution. And which are the unchecked exception? The classes which inherit runtime exception. Now the classes which inherit runtime exception. Now this is runtime exception, and these are the classes which inherit runtime exception. And these are called as unchecked exception because these are checked at the time of execution, not at the time of compilation. Okay, in case of error, error is irrecoverable, means errors are irrecoverable. If error occurs, the program cannot be recovered. Example, out of memory error, virtual machine error, assertion error. So these are some errors. Now in the hierarchy you can see errors are stack overflow, virtual machine, out of memory, or there are many other errors. These are irrecoverable, means if occurs, the program is sure to terminate. But in case of exceptions, we can handle the exceptions and program may continue its execution. Okay, these are some different types of exceptions in Java. With this, we will stop here in today's session. Thank you.